Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in again to another edition of Musings from the Mountains, presented by WVSports.com. It's our video podcast we do bi-weekly, sometimes tri-weekly. I'm managing editor Keenan Cummings.
And I'm staff writer Patrick Kotnik.
If you enjoy this video, if you've watched this before, I recommend you check out our producer's work, Tyson Murray. He's got a lot of videos up. Check it out. Go ahead and click subscribe. Take a look at all the stuff he does as well. But on the West Virginia front, a lot of news today. It's Tuesday. Tuesday usually means a lot of news from Neil Brown. Same thing happened today. Unfortunately for West Virginia, a lot of it is on the injury front. Again, I know you're getting sick of it. It's a broken record. It's playing until it won't stop. And nothing we can do about it. This is where West Virginia finds itself again, and we got to talk about injuries first. West Virginia has lost another bandit linebacker, as if they weren't thin at linebacker enough. Quandarius Qualls is out for the year. Had surgery. You will not be seeing him. That's kind of preempted the move of putting Dylan Tonkery to fill in there. West Virginia used some 3 safety looks against Baylor. You might probably see more of that looking forward because they don't have a lot of linebackers. The list of questionable players for this week against Texas Tech, pretty long, almost scroll-like. If you go down the list, let's just take Noah Guzman is questionable. Kennedy McCoy is questionable. Chase Barrett is questionable. Josh Chandler is questionable. Evan Staley is questionable. And TJ Simmons is doubtful, all with various injuries. That's a big chunk of your roster. You're already hurt with injuries, and now even more, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, it's injuries upon injuries upon injuries for this team. I mean, it's been a common theme for West Virginia throughout this whole season. But, I mean, as always, this is why they're in the spot that they're in. They're going to have to rely on next man up. You're going to have to continue to rely on some of these underclassmen, some of these redshirt freshmen, some of these true freshmen. Nothing new for the Mountaineers heading into the Texas Tech game.
Yeah, and I think the next man up mantra really took kind of a life of its own. Neil addressed that. They threw that play on 3rd and 2 against Baylor in large part because he trusted in what he said. That play is designed for TJ Simmons. They worked it for TJ Simmons. He was out of the game. So he kind of practiced what he preached. He threw it to Isaiah Isdale. It didn't work, but I think it's a telling sign that next man up's not just something they say around there. It's something they actually practice. More roster news, more personnel news. Captain Jack Allison is floating out of Morgantown. He's going to be in the transfer portal. I don't think this necessarily comes as a surprise. Maybe timing, you could argue, but there were 2 redshirt senior quarterbacks going to be going into next year. One of them hasn't started a game all year. It seemed only natural that he would graduate and look for another opportunity. Up and down, more down than up, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair to say. I mean, Jack Allison, I mean, he's had chances. I think he's made, just a handful of appearances, 7, I believe, and during his time at West Virginia. But, he's shown some flashes, but for the most part, I mean, it's been, a lot of downs for Jack Allison. But when you consider that, West Virginia will have Austin Kendall, Jarrett Dagey, Trey Lowe, and then you got incoming quarterback Garrett Green for next season. So not all that shocked, but, yeah, he'll be on his way out of Morgantown.
Yeah, 496 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 picks. Not eye-popping numbers by any means, but really limited in what he was able to do. Only had 1 start in his career. Had another game where he essentially started most of the game, but neither game really was eye-popping in terms of his production. Another player in the transfer portal. There it is again. I mentioned that transfer portal. It's coming and it's getting everybody. Swirling around Morgantown. It's also gotten Ricky Johns, former safety / wide receiver / wide receiver now, I suppose. Did not see the field. Saw 3 games last year. Has not seen the field this year. I think it's obvious, at that point, I think that's what the transfer portal is intended for, is to find yourself a place where you're going to be able to play. It's hard to fault Ricky Johns, hard to fault Jack Allison for either of those decisions. For West Virginia, I think this is natural attrition. You're going to see this. It hurts more considering their roster numbers. I think they're at 76 scholarships right now. Can add 22. Not ideal, but that's where they find themselves. They've had some attrition they couldn't help. Some that's natural, and then some that's been somewhat surprising.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about having for the team having to rely on some of these underclassmen, few people that were available for interviews today were some true freshmen: Tyke Smith, Ollie Jennings, Winston Wright.
Kick returner.
Yeah, and had that 95-yard kickoff return for a touchdown against Baylor. But we talk about some of these guys getting experience. The benefit that comes with these guys having to play probably before they're ready is that they get that experience. They get to adjust to that game speed, and that's exactly what Tyke Smith said today. He was asked, what was the biggest adjustment that you had to make, and for him it was just adjusting to the speed of the game. It's not easy going from high school to Division I, going to a Power 5 conference like the Big 12, but he did say, the more you're out there, the more the game will eventually slow down for you. You make some plays, you get some confidence. That's one benefit that West Virginia can have by playing some of these underclassmen here this season.
Yeah, moving forward, though, something I thought was very interesting and maybe didn't even get enough play during the course of the press conference was Neil talking about the backup quarterbacks. With Jack Allison leaving, there's a natural opening there, and it might be more than just an opening. He said both are going to have a chance to play, opportunity to play.
Going to battle it out.
Yeah, the quarterback room is not giving what he wants at this point. I think that's fair. Austin Kendall's had his struggles. A lot of people have been circling this game. Maybe this is where you see Jarrett Dagey. Maybe it is. Him and Trey Lowe are going to battle it out. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, who plays, who emerges, what are the reps going to be like. He didn't make it seem like this is going to be, surprise, Jarrett Dagey's your starter, or surprise, Austin Kendall's your starter and is going to play the whole game. I think it's more of a situation where it's going to be filling it out. If he struggles, if Kendall struggles, I think you could see one of these quarterbacks in this game, because at some point they've got to get more efficiency and they have to be able to try to stretch the field, because it hasn't happened this year.
Well, and you look at what's happened in West Virginia the past couple of years at the backup quarterback position. Even if Austin Kendall is a starter next season, I think it's important to get your backup some reps. That's been a problem for West Virginia in the past with Chris Chugunov, Jack Allison. Get these guys some reps and just see what they can do. That way they have that game experience. But not only quarterback, I think it's going to be interesting to see what other players get in there at different position groups. One name that was brought up today by a co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, Matt Moore, was Parker Moore. He said he's the most physically ready, probably the most ready to go as far as people he wants to redshirt this year. So I think it's more than likely he'll play at this point. But at some point, you got to think about the future at both tackle positions. Left tackle Colton McKivitz, right tackle Kelby Wickline. Both are in their final year with the program. So at some point, you got to start thinking about the future. But you run into the problem that you just don't want to pull Kelby and Colton. But at some point, you do want to get Parker some reps as well.
Yeah, I think you see the debut of Tony Mathis too, regardless of if Kennedy McCoy plays. They're hopeful he'll play, but if he doesn't, I think you'll see a bigger workload from him. But it's Letty Brown, Tony Mathis, and Kennedy McCoy right now is kind of your backs that they're going to be leaning on. Switching gears a little bit, talk a little bit about basketball. We were able to watch an exhibition over the weekend. Pat, other than Oscar Tshiebwe, what stood out to you?
Oscar stood out, but I would say, there's still some wrinkles in that West Virginia defense, I would say. Now, started off pretty good. They were aggressive, especially, at half court. They're not running that full court press, but half court defense started off pretty good. You saw them, forcing some turnovers, trapping some guys, but you started to see some of the problems that they had last season develop later on, later in the first half and at points during the second half. They're not keeping their guys in front of them. They're letting them drive. They're letting guys get open shots. Still some wrinkles in there. I'm interested to see whether or not they'll improve here in the coming week.
For me, 3-guard lineups. It was a thing. I didn't think it would be. It's been talked about, but it was a thing. I know the Blue Lots happy about that, to finally get some 3-guard lineups. There were more mixing and matching. Some of that's necessity. The lineup kind of dictates that, but it was refreshing to see it. I think West Virginia's going to have success with those. Also, the new guys aren't afraid to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Taz Sherman, Sean McNeil, those guys are going to let it go. They're going to play. I mentioned Oscar at the opening, but I think when you're a true freshman, you have 17 points and 14 rebounds.
Double-double.
Don't really need to expound much further on that. I would like to see him get in the post, not float out a little bit more, but I think that's going to come. He just plays with the tenacity and a nonstop motor. I think he is going to be a special player by the time it's all said and done, regardless of how long that is at West Virginia. West Virginia plays Texas Tech this weekend on the football side. Games at noon, everybody's favorite kickoff We'll all be there with bells on. We will preview that here in a few days, as we usually do, go in depth, take your questions. But thanks for tuning in again. This has been another fun-filled edition of Musings from the Mountains.